Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing our first Glee episode deep dive with the Rocky Horror Glee Show. But before we get into that, I would just like to say thank you so much for getting me to 1,000 subscribers. I did not think that would be happening. So thank you to anyone who has subscribed or who has watched my videos. It really does mean a lot to me. As I discussed in my last video on the Glee documentary, I've been wanting to do some breakdowns, discussions on some specific Glee episodes, the more like standout episodes, I would say. And I've decided to start with the Rocky Horror themed episode due to a suggestion by my friend, and also because it's a great episode. If you haven't seen Glee, this probably will not make sense, but I'll give you a general overview that it is about a group of show choir kids in high school and their adventures. And if you don't know what the Rocky Horror Picture Show is, it is a very famous cult classic film and musical that is often performed to an audience with a lot of audience interaction. And it's really fun to go to if you have the opportunity to go to a Rocky Horror show. Showing, I would strongly recommend. So the episode starts in a similar way to the start of the Rocky Horror Picture Show movie, in which it has just a black screen with one of the characters' lips cut out on it singing the first song, which is science fiction double feature. In the Glee version, it's Santana's lips, I believe, and they even copied the Rocky Horror credits section with all the Glee characters' names on it, and overall it's just really well done for the intro. The episode then starts with the Glee Club performing over at Frankenstein Place on a stage with full costumes and setup. We're kind of thrown into the middle. The performance is fine. We don't see much of it. It gets interrupted by John Stamos, who is a reoccurring special guest on Glee. He barges in and starts yelling at Will, and it pauses freeze frame on Will's stupid face, and we learn that we're about to flash back 1 week. So we flash back 1 week to see what spurred on the Glee production of Rocky Horror, and we see Will talking with his on and off flirtation relationship, Emma Pillsbury, the school guidance counselor. And Emma, a big part of her plot line, especially around this time, is that she's struggling with OCD. And Will and Emma had a thing earlier, but now Emma is dating Carl, who's played by John Stamos. And Will and Emma are talking, and Emma's clearly getting better. She feels better. She feels like she has more control of her life, and Will's being an asshole about it. Will's like, hey, you're not allowed to get more mentally healthy with another man. You have to be with me and stay mentally unhealthy. So Emma tells Will that she and Carl had went to a showing of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and Will is like, oh, she likes Rocky Horror. I'm going to try to impress her by putting it on with the Glee Club. And Will, that is freak behavior. Why are you making these teenagers do Rocky Horror in some weird twisted scheme to try to get Emma to like you and break up with her boyfriend? You're a freak. So next we cut to the Glee Club. They're talking about Halloween because this is the Halloween episode, and Brittany says she's going dressed as a peanut allergy. So Will comes in and tells them they're going to be doing Rocky Horror, and instead of the logical thing to do, which would be to hold auditions to figure out who plays what part, Will just assigns them parts. It's like, Rachel, you're playing Janet, and Finn, you're playing Brad, and Artie, we're going to make you play the one in the wheelchair. And then Will asks Kurt to play Frankenfurter because he's the only gay man. And Kurt says he's not comfortable doing that. But then Mike Chang offers to play Frankenfurter, and shout out to Mike for that one. I would have loved to see it. And a whole conflict on this is that Rocky Horror is very sexually suggestive and not appropriate for a high school to put on. So Will says he'll do some rewrites, but interestingly, he still chooses to keep the costumes in which some of the students are going to be on stage in their underwear. Hey, Will, if you're rewriting parts of it, you could have changed that. So next we get introduced to our antagonizing force in this episode and many other episodes, Sue Sylvester, and we see her on her reoccurring news segment called Sue's Corner. And she goes on a rant about Halloween that has a little bit of slut shaming and a little bit of transphobia, but that's just how Sue sees it. But after this news segment, Sue gets approached by 2 reporters who want her to expose Will and the Glee Club for putting on this inappropriate musical. And I just learned while researching that the 2 news reporters that come up to her are the actors who originally played Brad and Eddie. Like Meatloaf, who played Eddie, Meatloaf is in Glee. I didn't know that. And these 2 reporters have this whole like back and forth satirical conversation about like news media stoking unnecessary fear in the public, and it's really funny, I'm not gonna lie.
News is about fear. For example, Tim, did you hear about that swarm of Africanized killer bees?
Oh, wouldn't it be awful to see an entire town overrun by killer bees?
I'm sorry, did you just say, Tim, an entire town overrun by killer bees?
Well, I didn't.
There's your quote.
And you can replace killer bees with whatever you want. Terrorists.
Mexicans.
Mexican terrorists.
Ants.
Mexican terrorist ants.
Now we move back into the Glee room for the next musical performance of this episode, which is Damn It, Janet. But before they begin, they of course have to body shame Finn for a while, which is something that they do way too much of in this series and definitely would have negatively impacted my mental health if I was being put through that as an actor. Then the performance itself, it's actually really good, I'm not gonna lie. Finn eats it up as Brad.
The fire in my heart and you fan it. Janet. If there's one fool for you, then I am it. Janet. I've one thing to say and that's damn it, Janet, I love you.
And they have like Mercedes, Kurt, and Quinn being like background characters in this little dance. And what the fuck is Mercedes' outfit? Why would you dress her in that? You did her so dirty. Kurt's is weird too, but I can't tell if it's supposed to be a costume. But Mercedes is just like a bad outfit. These costume designers on Glee like just did not know how to make a good outfit, or they hated the actors. So after Finn gets body shamed, he approaches some of the other boys in Glee Club to talk about diet and fitness and self-image. And while they're talking, Artie says some weird things about the access of internet porn and how it rewired women's brains to want men to be more attractive, and it gets weird and incel-y and a little misogynistic, just how Artie always is for some reason. But then Sam also tells us a little bit about his own self-image, diet, and workout routine. And Sam, I hate to tell you this, but I think you have an eating disorder. His mentality towards food and fitness is not good and not healthy. He says, if I miss a workout or eat a hot dog, I'm gonna hate myself for a few days. And Sam, you don't need to be living like this. I want you to get help. But of course, as Glee does, this is a plotline that is never taken anywhere. It's just like dismissed. Then we go back to Will and Emma talking in Emma's office. And Emma, why are you never like doing your job? You are a school guidance counselor. I'm never seeing you provide guidance. But while Will and Emma are talking, Mike Chang comes in and says his dad is not letting him do Rocky Horror because he doesn't want him playing Frankenfurter, except Mike Chang phrases it as he doesn't want me playing a and he says the T slur. And hey, why'd we have to say that? Writers of Glee, why'd we have to include that one? I forgive Mike Chang. I will say, I'll forgive Mike Chang. It's not his fault. But I am disappointed that they had Mike Chang pull out of playing Frankenfurter, because I would have loved to see that. I think he would have slayed. So when Mike pulls out, they're like, oh no, we need a new Frankenfurter. I know. Let's cast an adult in the role in this high school Glee Club play. Let's cast a full-grown adult. So of course they invite Carl to come to the Glee Club and give a little performance to try out for the role, even though nobody else had to try out. And John Stamos as Carl sings Hot Patootie, and it's an okay performance. I don't really like John Stamos' voice specifically for this song, and he's not a singer, so I'm not like holding that against him. But the actual like performance part, other than the vocals, was pretty good. But Carl says he's not gonna play Frankenfurter because that would be weird, but he'll play Eddie. And so Mercedes steps up and says, I will play Frankenfurter. I know it's not like the traditional casting, but I think I would do well. And she does. So then we go on to the next musical performance, which is Mercedes singing Sweet Transvestite, which I listened to like every day in 9th grade. Every day in 9th grade, that was in the earphones. And this performance goes crazy, of course. Mercedes always kills it, and the costumes are actually really good. Shout out to Emma for that one, because in the plot line Emma was in charge of making all the costumes, and A+. One thing about this performance that I find really funny though is the chorus of the song goes, I'm a sweet transvestite from transsexual Transylvania. And they kept in the sweet transvestite part, but they're like, I don't think we can say transsexual there, even though they dropped the T slur earlier. And they decided, we're going to make it sensational Transylvania. And I'm not like, I don't have beef with that decision. Like, I don't care. I just think it's really funny. After this, Will is considering the comments other people have had about this being too risque for students. And he's like, oh, you're so right. I can't have Sam up there playing Rocky only in like golden briefs. He's like, that's not appropriate. I can't have that. So instead, I'm gonna play Rocky, and I'm gonna be up there as a fully grown man in the golden briefs with a bunch of teenagers, because that's better. So he approaches Emma Pillsbury, who loves Rocky Horror as well, and says, I need to learn Touch Me by rehearsals tomorrow, and I need your help. And in researching this, I also learned that this was the actress who plays Emma's audition song for Glee, and I love that. And I mean, her voice, like, works pretty well for Janet. They have the same, like, really high, like, almost nasally, but not in, like, a bad way. I don't mean that in a bad way. But they have the same, like, almost tone of voice. And the lyric changes in this version to make it, like, less sexual and suggestive is really funny. I'm not gonna lie. There are some times where you're listening, you're like, that made no sense.
There's no use getting into heavy sweating. It only leads to trouble and bad fretting.
And listen, Emma Pillsbury's fashion is questionable at times, but I really fuck with the shirt she's wearing in this one. I do. If you have never seen this performance, keep it that way. Because while Emma's going there singing, doing all her fun stuff, Will is just standing there looking painfully horny the whole time, and it's uncomfortable, and it's weird. And at one point, Emma rips his shirt off, and he's shirtless for the rest of it. Didn't need to see that. And the worst part is at the very end of the song, where it's that part where all of the characters go up and say, creature of the night. And Will Schuester, it's like a shot upwards, right? So like the camera's here shooting upwards. He crawls over the camera, shirtless, with just a tie on. He goes, creature of the night, except his face is like fucking terrifying, and it haunts my nightmares.
Creature of the night.
And I would just like to call Will out for his bullshit, because he told Emma, I have to have this song down by rehearsals tomorrow. Will, you have one line in this entire song, and it's you saying creature of the night at the end. You did not need to rehearse this. Next, we see the Glee Club on stage going through a run-through of one of the scenes, and it's the scene where they're like, Brad, Janet, Rocky, you know, like that one where they just keep saying like each other's names like 5 times in a row as a loop, and Sue keeps inserting this like hilarious fucking commentary about it.
Like, it's terrible. Finn's like, Dr. Scott! Janet!
Dr. Scott!
Finn's like, Janet!
I'm so bored I just fell into a microsleep.
Brad! Rocky!
Janet!
Dr. Scott!
Still being Finn. Janet!
Brad! None of this is plausible. Rocky!
Janet!
Dr. Scott!
Finn's like, Janet!
Brad! Rocky!
This play has incredible pacing problems.
And honestly, that scene is peak cinema. Sadly, this scene is cut off, though, when Will has to go to the principal's office and learns that Finn was suspended for walking down the halls in his Rocky Horror costume, which is shirtless with like a pair of white boxers on. He was supposed to be suspended for a month and having to do summer school to make up for it, which is insane for just like walking down the hallways in what are essentially shorts, if you're being so real. And also, if he's not allowed to wear that walking down the hallway, why in the hell is he allowed to wear it on stage for a musical in front of everyone? But Will eventually convinces the principal to let him go with a warning. They return to the stage and they're singing Over at Frankenstein Place again. We return to the beginning of the episode, so we're out of the flashback section now, and John Stamos once again runs in and confronts Will over doing all of this to try to get closer to Emma, who is John Stamos' girlfriend. After this whole confrontation and conundrum, Will is confronted by Sue, and Sue tells him, you know, like, this is inappropriate to be putting on with these children, and I'm going to expose you. And Will's like, you're right, I'm gonna cancel the play. And Sue gets pissed because she was really hoping for that local Emmy. So Will has finally decided not to put on this musical for the school, and he talks to Emma about it, and Emma, run away, please. Run from Will. Will tells Emma that he did this whole thing to try to get closer to Emma. Emma, you're taken. That's a weird thing to do, and you should distance yourself from this man. And while you might think that's the end because they've decided to not put on this musical anymore, Will tells the entire Glee Club, actually, we're going to put the musical on for ourselves with no audience, and that is freak behavior. Putting on a whole musical for 0 audience. But they had to make that decision so they could show us one last musical number where they're doing the time warp, and I love this performance. And unexpectedly, Kurt kind of slays the role of Riff Raff. He really gets into the character. And there's really cool choreography throughout the whole thing, incorporating, you know, the traditional, like, dance that goes with the time warp, but then also some additional choreography. They had, like, double casted some of the minor roles, and one of them was Magenta, and they had Brittany and Tina both playing Magenta. And I'm so sorry, Tina, but Brittany outslayed you so hard. And that needs to be said. So you're feeling happy, you just watched the time warp, it's a great episode of Glee, and then they have to end on a shot of Will Schuster's fucking face again and ruin everything. Of course, I'm being a little dramatic with that one, but that is how the episode ends. So now I'm gonna go over some like general thoughts and categories that I'm gonna try to keep incorporating if I'm doing more Glee episodes, and the first of these is song choice for the episode. Now, obviously for this episode, they were going to be doing songs from the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and I think they got all of the heavy hitters, they got all the big ones I wanted, they got Damn It Janet, they got Sweet Transvestite, I really like that they did Hot Patootie, and of course they have Time Warp. I could have done with a rendition of Eddie, but I understand if it didn't fit in the plot line and it's not like one of the major ones, so like I'm not that mad. The next category I want to talk about is the plot line, and the plot line of this episode is very contained. It doesn't have a lot of like overarching effects on the rest of the plot, except for maybe for Will and Emma's like relationship. And Will and Emma's relationship is kind of the main plot focus of this, but we also get a little bit in this episode about Sam and Finn and their issues with self-image and their bodies. But as I said before, this isn't really brought up a lot after this. And the final aspect I want to cover is costumes / just outfits. So starting with the actual like performance costumes, the Rocky Horror costumes themselves were, as I said before, pretty good. I really liked like the Brad and Janet dynamic. They weren't the most out there costumes, but I think they really fit the characters. Of course, Mercedes' Frankenfurter outfit was really good. Now moving on to more of just the outfits that they would wear when they weren't performing. Overall, I'd say it was pretty like bland and subdued in this episode. There weren't a lot of standout outfits in a good or a bad way. I think these like earlier seasons of Glee tended to have less standout outfits. I was watching like seasons 5 and 6 earlier with my friends, and the outfits get bad, like stand out bad. That one Mercedes outfit was pretty weird, but other than that, nothing exceptional. So yeah, that is the Rocky Horror Glee Show episode of Glee. I hope you enjoyed this discussion, and let me know if you would like to see more Glee episode breakdowns in the future and what episodes you would like me to break down. Also, of course, if you have any other video ideas, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. I would appreciate it so much if you were to like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!